One, two, three. This is David Schwartz, and this is Cinema Showcase.
Lalo Schifrin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Joining me on today's Cinema Showcase is a very talented composer, a man who's been around for, about 20 years now, composing very memorable themes from motion pictures and television, Lalo Schifrin. Lalo, welcome to Cinema Showcase.
It's a great pleasure to be here, David.
Probably the most familiar theme that our audience recognizes is your theme from Mission Impossible. I guess it was about 15, 16 years ago?
Probably, yes.
Looking back on it now, some 15 years later, what is your recollections about the Mission Impossible theme?
Well, my whole life has been a Mission Impossible. As far as that theme was concerned, I remember the late Bruce Geller, who was a great guy. I met him right in that show, and they were shooting. They invited me to the set and gave me a script to read. I couldn't make any sense of it. But once he put it together, and it was a pilot for one of the networks, we didn't know if it was going to sell or not. I wrote the funny thing is that theme I didn't write it right away because mainly what we needed was a theme for the bulk of a dramatic theme. It was international intrigue, you remember, and the spies and all that, and they were all members of a mission, a team. And he wanted me to write a theme for each one of the characters. I said, no, that would be wrong, because we need the music to bind this is almost like paramilitary operation, and what we should need is one theme that binds all of them, whatever they're doing. Greg Morris and Martin Landau and Barbara Bain and all the Peter Graves, whatever they're doing in different locales, they are all working for a common goal, to accomplish a mission. And I think we have to. Yeah, somebody.
Okay, back to the Mission Impossible.
Yes, they were all going to accomplish a mission, and I thought that to have one theme that would bind all the elements and all the people in order to accomplish that mission. That was very important. It was the very dramatic march, dun, 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 remember? But then, for the main title music, that was too dark and too somber and too dramatic and too suspenseful. So we decided to do something a little bit more tongue-in-cheek and more uplifting and, with a lot of vigor and a beat. So I wrote that music there was no visuals to that. They built the visuals to the music. And that's it. I mean, that's the story of Mission Impossible. There's no more than that. Then it became a big success, the show and the music, and it was very satisfying.
Now you have a brand new project, Sting 2, which we just opened last Friday as this show is airing. How did this assignment come about?
Well, I was approached by the producer, Jennings Lang, in 1981, and I was given the first script to read, and I liked it, and I accepted it. And then Jeremy Kagan was hired to be the director, and he also talked to me, and the project went. The first thing was based on music of Scott Joplin, and the reason that George O'Hill used it, despite of the many criticisms that about the anachronism, why did he use the music of Scott Joplin during the Depression era? Paul Newman wrote read for the Depression era. You hear ragtime, that is from the early century. I mean, actually, it's turn of the century, and I leave it the first 10 years or 15 years of our century. That kind of ragtime was played. So they don't realize that he is intelligent. He knows that it's an anachronism, but there are certain licenses you take But it's more than a license. Nobody accused Kubrick of using in 2001, which is a futuristic movie, a waltz of Johann Strauss. That has nothing to do with Imperial Vienna. The visuals you see, the dance of the universe at that moment has nothing to do with Imperial Vienna. And in that sense, the period of the first thing had nothing to do with the music of ragtime, but the ragtime worked very well from a dramatic point of view, because there is a slick innocence in ragtime music that works very well for con games and all this kind of thing, you know. Now, when I approached it, we didn't know if it was going to be following the same pattern of the first one. One thing we knew, that the entertainer probably was not going to be the theme. And it went like a pendulum. Sometimes we went to decided maybe to use music of the period of this thing, which is early 40s. And then we decided to make a sort of, not really a compromise, but to integrate all these elements in what Jeremy Kagan calls make a quilt of American music that keeps you warm and happy. And that's what we did. I mean, in the first thing, which was more stylized, there was a style with a Saturday Evening Post, remember, format, unfolding pages, and they were having episodes between. It was what we call time-lapse music, transition music, and the piano would play a ragtime, you know, and that was it. I mean, because that was the style of the picture. In this one, Jeremy Kagan decided not to use actors like Redford and Newman that could be compared easily. You know, there are many actors like Jeff Bridges would be a good choice if you want to replace Robert Redford for a sequel. I think that he decided mainly to stay with personalities like Jackie Gleason and Mac Davis. And the whole style of the picture doesn't have those Saturday Evening Post transitions. Therefore, my music is not transitional. My music is really underscoring. And when I say underscoring, I have to follow the action. There is some source music, you know, some music coming from bands of the period, and also in the underscoring itself, I integrated some of the period music. I don't know how I did it, but it worked out. No, I think it's. I made it work out. It's part of my job to make it work out. Now, how successful? I'm very pleased that it came out so well, you know, because at the beginning I had no clue that the result was going to be so good.
Now, Heliotrope Bouquet, is that the main thing that's used in the movie?
Yes, it's written by Louis Chauvin and Scott Joplin in collaboration. And the second section, one of the reasons I liked it, I am a jazz musician, and jazz musicians are very. I mean, I used to be a jazz musician. Let me put it this way: I have like 3 personalities at least. But one of them being associated with jazz, my breed of jazz musicians, with the bebop musicians, we didn't listen to lyrics, we didn't listen to melody, we only listened to chord structures. And I find that the second section of the Heliotrope Bouquet has almost the same chord structure of Tip for Two, which is a tune that could have been played in the movie as very authentic. So I picked on that right away. You know, that was a very, very good, like they say, handle, hook, whatever. And that was a very, very convenient. Let me put it this way: Scott Joplin and Chauvin made things easy for me.
Is it easier doing a period film like a 1940s Sting-type movie, or a more modern film of today, set in today, 1982 or 1983?
Well, there are periods.
Which do you prefer? Do you prefer the modern films or the...
Depends how I get dressed. I mean, no, I always dress the same for it. It's like asking an actor what does he like to do. I mean, if there are actors who are so complete in their training, and they can do Shakespeare and they can do comedy and they can do something of today, and all of a sudden you give them a new Simon comedy and they do it, and I feel comfortable in any period as long as the main line of the movie is appealing and inspires me. Then the problem of the period, let me put it this way, the period is the dress, the makeup. What you have to have is the naked, without makeup, without any dress. What is the main line of the movie? It's like in painting. You can have a sketch first, but then the real painting comes out. The combination of colors and all that comes out later. So I that's a question. It's not that I'm not trying to answer. It's I like all periods. As a matter of fact, they're all a challenge. And I've done pictures like the Four Musketeers, in which I reproduce the whole history of Western music from the late Renaissance up to late 20th century, because it starts as a comedy and ends in a drama, and in the drama I had to really use... There is a moment in which D'Artagnan and Rochefort had a fight in the church, and at that moment I am really into avant-garde, post-Webern techniques. On the other hand, the beginning of the movie is late Renaissance, which is the period where the movie is. But we in film composers, we have to grab any technique, any period, anything. All of a sudden, what happens if I get an assignment to do a picture about Indonesia, that happens in the locales Indonesia or Africa or South America? Ethnomusicology is one of my fortes, and it's very useful in the making of films, because sometimes you hear in the background some ethnic music from any country, and I try to do it as authentic as I can.
Now, in a score like The Sting 2, what kind of pre-preparation, what kind of research do you do goes into a score? You're adapting Scott Joplin music. Do you do any type of research?
Well, I did a lot of research. I mean, I lived with Scott Joplin for 2 years, and I like him. After living with him for 2 years, I do like him. He's a great musician, and he's incredible. We were talking before about 2001, and I think he's a sort of American Johann Strauss. He has that charm, that innocence, and at the same time that musicianship. The difference, obviously, with Johann Strauss is that he's more syncopated, and some of his roots are, the New Orleans and the Caribbean and all that. It's a different background, but the result is always very charming and very, very well constructed, and he knew what he was doing.
Some of the other tracks from the Sting 2 soundtrack album that we're going to be playing, we're going to play a track called Coney Island. It sort of has more of a big band type feel to it.
Well, it should have a big band, because you see a big band on the stage and on the screen. I mean, it'll be very funny to have a string quartet when you see like, I don't know, 14 or 12 nice girls, their high heels and stockings, and they're playing. It's a big band of that era, of the 40s, and they're really playing it, so you should have that feeling. In that number I did what is called the apotheosis of boogie woogie, because I took all the cliches and I exaggerated the boogie woogie, and I took it to the limit. But on the other hand, I did it with great respect, because my influences were Count Basie. There was a black band at that period called Lucky Millinder, which is probably not too known by the general audience. and obviously Duke Ellington, and all that together. You know, it was great fun to work on that.
Isn't there also a vocal song in the movie?
Yes, Jeremy Kagan wrote the lyric, and I wrote I could say I wrote the music. It's a traditional blues. When now that song was going to be more prominent in the final movie, but because of what happens in pictures, you have to cut and take things out. The song is not out; it's still in the movie, but you can barely hear in the apartment house of Mark Davis. Somebody's playing a record from one of those apartments, and Linda Hopkins, who performed a few years ago, she performed a play, a one-woman play in the Mark Taper Forum, was Bessie and Me, the Bessie Smith story. And she's an actress as well as one of the greatest blues singers around.
Now let's go back into your background. Get our audience more familiar with
my triple personality.
Yes, your triple personality.
Well, my father was the concertmaster of Buenos Aires Philharmonic. His brother, which is my uncle, was the first cello of the same orchestra, and from my mother's family also they were all musicians. In my house, string quartets were playing on weekends instead of playing poker or something, bridge, canasta. I grew up in classical music. That's one. I pursue my studies of very seriously, and I even went to Paris and continue in the conservatory and private lessons and all that. Especially composition is the thing that attracted me the most. That's one of the personalities. The other personality is, when I was 9 years old, I was in school, in grammar school, and in one of the recesses, the day before I had seen a horror movie. I think it was Bela Lugosi or Dracula or something, Boris Karloff movie. And in the recess I told the children, I've seen this movie yesterday, and I bet you that without the music it wouldn't be so frightening. So at 9 years old I was able already to analyze the contribution that music can make to a movie. And at that time, except here in Hollywood or around the movie studios or in France or in Germany, wherever, nobody realized, I'm saying, except for the specialists in this field, there was not a cult, there was not a thing. Now you see in the record store there are music films, film music and film music buffs. They are talking very seriously about this, and they made a whole culture. There is also a cult about Bernard Herrmann, which is well deserved. I'm saying, but at that time, nobody exposed me to that. I discovered, and I always been a film buff, and I always went to see films, sometimes many times because of the score. The first one that made a big impact on me was Alexander Nevsky, with music by Prokofiev. And then I kept developing that without even knowing that I was going to end up being a film composer. Also, I was exposed to opera, which is very dramatic. Maybe I absorbed it unconsciously. When you go to hear Verdi and see a Verdi opera, the music in the pit is very much like background music. We wouldn't do it that way today. In many cases, it's too over melodramatic, but still he had a sense of underscoring. Even some of his things are not so over dramatic. I went to see 1 year ago, I think. In Vienna. I went to see Othello again. After so many years, I haven't heard Othello, Verdi's Othello, by the Vienna Opera, and I was amazed at the scoring he did. It was as good as anything we could be doing now in Hollywood, in certain sections I'm talking. So that's one of the second personality. And the third personality is American music, you know, on the search of my own personality, trying to get independent from my father, I discovered modern American jazz, and I became mesmerized by it, and I had to come to this country the same way a Muslim has to go to Mecca. And I was in awe with this music, and I still am. And the great thing is, now all of a sudden I end up combining these three personalities, which the psychiatrist calls split personality. I was able to put them together, which keeps me away from the insane asylum.
Do you get to take a group out on tour every now and then and do some jazz concerts?
Well, no, very, very seldom I take a real group with me. I do some jazz concerts when the group is already organized and I go and play. You know, with George Wynn, and I did some things here at the Hollywood Bowl, and, you know, the Playboy Jazz Festival several times, and tribute to Dizzy Gillespie, and unfortunately I couldn't do one tour in Europe. But what I do now is guest conduct in symphony orchestras, and sometimes I take jazz musicians with me, and in the middle of the concert we do a jam session. But all is completely extemporaneous, as it should be.
Didn't you also play with Dizzy Gillespie at one time?
Well, he brought me to this country. He went to South America through a State Department tour with a big band, a real big band, no girls. Oh, there was a girl in that band. There was a trombonist, by the way. Her name was Melba Liston. She was a very good, and she is still a good trombonist and a good arranger. She lives in New York. What I was saying is, it was an incredible band. Quincy Jones was the fourth trumpet player in that band. Phil Woods. I mean, it was an all-star band. And I had my own band, and I played for him, and he liked it, and he offered me to come to this country, both as a pianist and arranger. I couldn't believe it, and it happened. And the first thing I did for him was a gold record. So I make always a joke that my career started. I didn't come to the United States to the back door and as a struggling musician living in the village. No. I came to the big door, and the first thing I did for him was the Gillespiana suite, which went gold. And as I said, I made this joke that I started at the top, so therefore my career after that had to go only downhill.
But it didn't.
No, as I say, it's a joke. But it's hard to go. I mean, when you start with so intimidated with all, there was elite of New York jazz at that time. You know, forget about Dizzy. All the other members in the band were the number one, and I was quite. And Gunther Schuller, by the way, who is the one who revived the music of Scott Joplin. You know that before the Sting won. Thanks to him, there was it's like Mendelssohn did in last century. He made people aware of the music of Bach, which was from 1 century earlier. Gunther Schuller is the responsible for all this. Except for the Maple Leaf Rag, Scott Joplin was not too known, you know that. And he's the one who made it possible through his recordings. Well, Gunther Schuller was playing French horn in that band. So that tells you how things come together in circles.
One of your other most recognizable TV themes is the theme from Mannix. Would you like to do a little introduction into the theme from Mannix before we hear it?
I can tell you a funny story about that. A year after we did Mission Impossible, the same producer of Mission Impossible came and said, we have a possibility of a pilot about a private eye with Mike Connors. It's called Mannix. Would you like to do the music? Oh yes, fine, I'll do it. But then they called me from 20th Century Fox. Paul Monage was doing the same story with another name. It was called Braddock. It was another actor. It was practically the same story. And I found out that the network was going to buy either one of the two, and I was greedy. I wanted to get the royalties. And it's like, betting when you throw a coin and it doesn't matter where it's going to come out, tails or heads. I knew that one of the two was going to sell. So they were coming, for instance, Bruce Geller would come and says, how does Braddock look? Oh, it looks all right. And then Paul Mona says, how is Mannix? It's all right. They didn't want to hear that. Obviously, my main problem here was to write two music that was so diametrically different that nobody could accuse me ever when they once saw that the other would be similar or even remotely similar. So I came with two different concepts. Well, Mannix is the one that sold, and I don't even remember what I wrote for Braddock. That's what happens with unsold music.
What are some of the other TV themes that you did?
Medical Center, Starsky and Hutch, I don't know, many. I mean, many TV themes. And I've done also about 70 theatrical pictures, without counting the movies of the week for TV. So I've been busy, as you can see.
What was your first theatrical film score?
It was one done in Argentina, for which I won the equivalent to the Academy Award. It was called El Jefe, which was a metaphor of the Perón regime in a gang. You know, I mean, it's not it's a young adults gang. It's not a gang. It's not a strict gang. They are into con games too, but it's not a sting. It's a dangerous things. I mean, they are vicious people, and they have a leader, and they're mesmerized by the leader. They are hypnotized by the leader, and they follow him, and it's, you know, Il Duce, Perón.
We're going to hear some other music, some of your other film music on the program. We're going to hear the music from The Four Musketeers. Would you like to tell our audience a little bit about that score?
Well, the only thing I can think about that score was that I had a great time doing it. I went to England. I had a great time working with Richard Lester, who, by the way, plays clarinet, and also Jeremy Kagan, the director of Sting 2, plays clarinet. So I don't know what's happening. And Woody Allen also plays clarinet. So all these filmmakers playing clarinet is a very... Maybe we should make an album. But no, going back to The Four Musketeers, it was, as you call it, a period piece, but it had all this charm and the adventure, you know, intrigue, Alexander Dumas with all his plots and all these things, the good guys and the bad guy and the evil lady, you know, Milady, and I had to make a femme fatale out of her, really fatale. It was fun.
We're also going to hear the love theme from The Competition, which I think features you on piano.
Yes, I played piano, but you know, the main problem with The Competition was to write a score where wherever you turn the corner, Beethoven is waiting for you, or Brahms, or Chopin. As a matter of fact, you know that we pre-scored the real music, the sound, talking about the classical music in The Competition. We pre-scored it with the Los Angeles Philharmonic and real pianists. When I went to the set and they had a stand-in orchestra, you know, pretending that they were playing, and the actors, Richard Dreyfuss and Amy Irving and all the other actors, pretending that they are playing, and someone to make it conducting, and he really had a good coach. He did it very, very well. I was amazed with all these things. I mean, it looked real. And the members of the crew who were a little bit unsophisticated, some of them were a little bit unsophisticated and didn't know too much about classical music. They knew that I'd been hired to be the musical director of the picture. They came to me and said, "Oh, Mr. Schifrin, the music is beautiful." And they thought that I was Brahms and Chopin and everybody. And I, you know what I said? Thank you. Because, you know, there was no point to start. Things were going fast. So in this picture, the challenge was to write something subtle and away from the classical. Let the classical music be classical, and let the score be score. And that was tough.
Of all the film scores you've done, has there been sort of like an undiscovered score that the public never really caught on to that you'd like them to be more aware of?
Well, I think that music for film, unless it's a theme, you know, where sometimes the chemistry happens that the movie happens to be a hit. and it has a special theme that has a special sound, like the Third Man theme, or any song. It could be a song like The Way We Were, you know. In those cases, the chemistry happens, and then you can sell records, and everybody's happy, and the subsidiary publishing company of the movie studio are very happy. But let me tell you, film music is a different kind of art form. It's supposed to help the manipulation of an audience. It's like a magic show where the magician is pulling rabbits, and it's illusion. This whole thing is, so the function of the music is incredible, because it's a little bit self-defeating, answering your question. I'm not writing. I have other outlets if I want to have my music play, like I say, jazz concerts, and I have a publisher who does my own avant-garde music, which I'm writing for classical avant-garde and electroacoustic music. But this is not the point. The point, when I'm writing music for film, I'm more of a filmmaker than a composer, because I'm bringing my own contribution as a specialist in sound. Are we okay?
Yes.
Sometimes even as especially in sound effects, there is a movie I've done that in which most of the sounds are done by me. It was called The Hailstorm Chronicle, which was a sort of documentary about insects. It was a theatrical film. I don't know if you've seen it.
I remember it, but I don't think I saw it.
And there is no theme song there. It would be impossible to do it. But what I'm trying to say is, a good film music is supposed to be sometimes unobtrusive, create a mood, you know, and sometimes it's supposed to explode and make. The contributions are different, you know, different possibilities. There are no rules in our art form. You can give 10 composers the same film to write music for, and that you're going to get 10 different results, and the 10 are as valid. You know, I'm talking about 10 professional composers who are in this field. The 10 are as valid as they are. You might like one more than the other, the director might like, the public might like, but I'm talking from a technical, in order to make the picture fit, it's going to work.
Thank you very much for being with us.
It's a great pleasure.